the same way, like the mystic cannot easily put their experience into language, because it's kind of beyond language, beyond reasoning, right?
It's a revolt and it's an acceptance, right? It's
Right.
you're accepting the
It's gotta be
revolt
both.
in a sense. Because he also had the example of bringing a knife to a group of people with swords or something like that, and how you kind of have to just accept the fight. Did want to ask you what you thought about how his version of absurdism, the way that Camus talks about absurdism, how that relates to Buddhism, and your own thoughts on Buddhism.
I think that, um, of course, they're starting at a similar place for sure. There's both of them are kind of accepting initially that, like, the world is not what I want it to be, right? Or at least initially, right? It's not the kind of world that I want, right? I want a world that's going to give me, comfort and pleasure and all of those sorts of things. And both of them are, I think, recognizing that takes away your freedom, right? And that actually causes way more suffering, in the end. So they both see that, and I think they're both honest about reality in that way. The other thing is like they both, I think, would like Buddhism will talk about attachment, right? Like, one of our and desire and these things, but attachment is one of the things that produces this suffering, right? That the world is constantly changing, right? And so when I'm attached to it, like, I suffer because of its change. I think Camus would certainly agree, right, that the world is constantly changing. That's part of its absurdity. And so how do I deal with that, right? And, one of the ways, Buddhism talks about, right, is non-attachment to things, right? And so, perhaps this is this kind of indifference that arises, for Camus, yeah. Right? I've got to have a type of indifference to things, in order to sort of deal with it. And also, like, this quantity versus quality, towards the end of the chapter,
yep.
I think is the same thing, right? Where, the Buddha is going to say, like, don't sort of consider any of your experiences like, good or bad, right? Like, and I think that that's the quantity here. I first read that, I'm like, well, what are you talking about, Camus? Like, of course we want, high quality experiences. Like, who cares how many I have? Like, I want high quality. And it's like, well, no, like, an experience is an experience, no matter what it is, whether you're on that, the bus or walking down the street, or sitting in a boring class, or, whatever it happens to be, right? Or you're doing, something that you enjoy, right? Like, for Camus, playing soccer, or, going to a movie, or, whatever, right? And so there's, now, do we end up with a kind of another type of leveling here? I don't think so, right?
Because what do you mean another type of leveling?
Right. So he mentions this a little bit, where when he's talking about philosophical suicide, that these philosophers, one of the things that they have recognized, that he agrees with, is that, like, through either reason or through the ethical for or Kierkegaard, or whatever, that there's a leveling process, a cultural leveling, where it's like everything is just the same, right? And there's no real there's no energy behind it. There's no joy behind it. Like, the joys that we think we have, right, are manufactured joys, right? We do those joys which culture says is like, like, this is what you should be doing. And so there's this leveling of our reality. Like, it becomes kind of dead in a certain sense. And so when that's removed, when sort of we take that away, right, that's when the absurdity rises. And it's usually at first in that conflict, because I see it for how it is, right? It no longer fits with the structure that I've been holding on to. I'm wanting to use the word embrace here. We're, like, embracing the experience, that we embrace our experiences, no matter what they are, right? And that's the only way we can actually experience them, right? Like,
I'm here now, because if you say, man, I can't wait for this to be over, you're going to be miserable now, because you're thinking about that future where you can escape. If you stop thinking, it's basically like, if you stop thinking that life is a prison, right, you'll be set free, right?
And I think both Buddhism and Camus um, you know, do that.